The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to this month's Practical Procurement Webinar, a boost of energy. It's a beautiful day outside. Hallelujah, the sun has come out. It's fantastic. So I'm delighted to have Kevan Walsh on the line. He's going to be taking us through some energy management information today, which will be incredibly useful, I know. Usual agenda, introductions and welcomes, which we're now doing. Who is Minerva, a little bit about why Zenergi, and then Kev will do his presentation, and then there'll be a Q&A and a little wrap-up session at the end. So, webinar etiquette. Everyone is on mute, so there's no background noise or distractions. If you have a comment or if you've got any kind of technical difficulties, just click on the raise my hand button and we will respond accordingly if you've got any problems. There will be a Q&A session at the end, as I say. If you wish to ask Kev a question, please type it in the question box and then I will present these to him at the end. You will find the question box by clicking on the arrow on the panel, which will reveal the box. You can then type the question in. It will flag up with me, so I'll know that you've asked a question, and then I can pose those to Kev at the end. This is being recorded, so if people haven't made it to the live event, then there will be an opportunity for people to review it, listen to it again, view the slides again, etc., etc. So a little bit about Minerva, for those of you that don't know. We are the UK's most successful procurement consultancy focused exclusively on the school sector. We don't work with any other sector at all. We purely work with schools, and that enables us to have a really deep understanding of schools and what their requirements are. You do have unique characteristics that aren't necessarily reflected in other types of organisations. We don't just do framework deals and a telephone number. We actually roll our sleeves up. We come and visit the school. We meet people that are involved in the procurement projects and make sure that everybody gets a say in what goes on. As the bursars will tell you, we don't always listen to what everybody says, because if we listen to everybody's view, we'd probably never get anywhere. But we do involve everybody where we can. We give detailed reports so you can make informed decisions. We give short lists of suppliers with recommendations, and we really do ensure that you get a compliant, fit-for-purpose, quality product or service. And we offer a guarantee, so we guarantee you'll be fully satisfied with our work, or our services don't cost a penny. And the only reason we can do that is because we're absolutely certain that our work is of such a high standard that we have yet to ever be called on that guarantee, which is fantastic. So why do we use Zenergi as our preferred supplier for our energy contracts? Because interestingly, we don't give a short list when it comes to using Zenergi. We only ever recommend Zenergi. They have a deep understanding of the education sector and look after over 500 schools across the whole of the UK, every type of school that you can imagine. Their service is award-winning, their pricing is exceptionally competitive. I think in all the time that I've been working with them over 4 years, there has only been 3 occasions where they've not been the cheapest, and if I'm honest, the deal that was on offer in those particular circumstances was so good that we just said to the schools, snap their hand off and take it. They are supplier agnostic, which is really important, so they will pick the best deal for you from all the suppliers that are out in the marketplace. And historically, they've also picked the best time to go to market for contracts, and I know Kev's got a little bit about that later on in his presentation. No school is too small or too big, so they don't sort of say, well, there's only certain people we'll deal with. And they do also provide additional information support, and they don't make loads of additional charges for all the different things that they do. So for all those reasons, that's why we've been working with Zenergi for the last 4 years, and will continue to do so, and why I've asked Kev to come today and do our presentation. So I'm now going to hand back across to Kev so he can do his little section, and then I'll do the Q&A and the wrap up at the end. So over to you, Kev.
All right. Excellent. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much, Elaine, for that introduction. We're just going to go through trying to cover off the whole energy industry today in one foul swoop in about 15-20 minutes or so. So there's lots of information to go through and to kind of pick out. Hopefully you'll answer some questions when once we've come to the end. And I'm just having a few technical issues here. That's typical, isn't it? There we go. Right, so the plan for today, we're just going to go through some basics of energy procurement. how to avoid some costly mistakes from an actual contracts perspective, invoice validation, is it smoke and mirrors, because there's a lot of companies out there saying they can do it when they're actually not doing it correctly. A bit of a background on the markets, they are very volatile, and the $6 million question is, have I secured the right price? If I could tell you that, then I'd be sat on a beach in Bahamas somewhere, probably not talking to Lorraine and you guys, but we'll hopefully give you a bit of background of the information and knowledge that we managed to obtain, and a little bit on energy management, which in itself is a massive area, so we'll try and cover as much as we can. So a little bit about Zenergi. Currently we've just got over 3,000 meters that we supply, a total volume of 670 gigawatt hours. The spend we look after from the school's perspective is 39.3 million. And testament to us, really, we have 131 clients that have been with us over 10 years, and our customer retention rate is 98.2%. So we've got a good reputation in the industry. And just so far, since September 2013, we've actually saved £620,000 from invoice validation and from a contracts perspective, so a fair amount of money there. We don't take share of savings unlike Lorraine, but our fees are slightly separate, so we can come on to that later with a question if you wish. Just going back there, we are the preferred consultancy to NASDAQ and to ASCL as well. So from the energy procurement perspective, what are the basics? Well, where all costs are fixed, you'd have an energy rate, a transmission rate, so when it comes down the transmission network into the local distribution network, you have a monthly charge, a capacity charge, and some losses, because electricity and gas do lose some power on its way to your schools. And they generally are all added into the unit rate, so you'll have a fixed day-night, a fixed night rate, and some fixed monthly and capacity charges. Coming as before now, which we'll touch on later on, are green taxes. You've got to be very aware of those, because some suppliers include them and some don't. So from a comparison perspective, you can get caught out quite wildly, actually. And there'll be a supplier and a TPI margin, potentially, with how we get our fees from a small commission, and that'll be added into the rate, and you have the VAT and CCL added onto that if you need to pay those. So where they're fixed, so there are in essence two types of contracts. You have a fixed contract and a flexible type contract. The fixed is when all the charges are fixed, they're included into unit rates, and you kind of know it's easier to budget. From a flexible purchasing method or a pass-through method, you will have a very, very detailed invoice and contract. You'll have a fixed cost for energy at a particular time that you wish to buy it, and you can buy that, your whole volume, in one hit. You could buy just a summer month, you could buy an October month, you can buy half of October, half of February, and a bit of, a third of summer. So that it's a very, very flexible way of purchasing, and you've got to be a fairly intelligent trader, really, to get these kind of things right, because the markets can actually bite you in the ankle sometimes. But these energy procurement methods are called FPA, which is a forward purchase agreement, or you can have a PWP, which is a purchase within period contract. And also the transmission and distribution losses that are charged will be passed through at a published tariff. So you have no control over those, and they change every April for electricity and every October for gas. So a much more flexible method of purchasing, and we tend to like it to either a fixed mortgage or a flexible mortgage. If you want to go with the markets and the flexible mortgage, you take the risk. But if you want to lock in and fix your interest rate with the bank, then that's kind of more the fixed method. So again, the other options are included within that as well, the green taxes, supplier margin, etc. So from a delivered price perspective, you should currently be looking at something about between 8 and 12p for electricity. If you're anything lower than 8p, definitely keep your head down. You're on a very, very good rate. If you're anything over 12p, it's sort of verging up to 13ish now, but if you're anything hovering around the 12p mark, then it's probably worth having a look and going out to market and have a look, see what you can obtain. From a gas perspective, those who have gas, you'll be looking at between 2 and 3p if you're fully delivered gas, but there is a caveat on the standing charge, because there's a daily standing charge that can range from kind of 20p up to £20 a day, depending on your volume. So that's obviously quite a substantial cost to you. From the percentage-wise, this has actually changed considerably. Back in 2011, there was more like 65 to 70% was the wholesale energy cost of a delivered contract. And now, because of green taxes and the fact that these additional charges are coming in, the wholesale energy cost has gone down to 59%, and the CHIOS, GWOS, ARA and FIT is kind of 38–40% really. So another charge is the two. So it gives you now a breakdown. It's kind of becoming a little bit less relevant as to when you want to go to market, because there's only 60% of the charges are actually energy related now. But it's still a big impact if you get it wrong. You can have a 10–20% within day swing often if something happens in the world that isn't going our way. So from the price increase perspective, these are charges which you really need to be aware of. If you haven't seen them on your bill already, they are definitely coming. The feed-in tariff is a green tax levied on really renewers solar panels and the export generation that solar panels provide. We as end users have to cover the cost of the feed-in tariff that the government are paying for solar panels. And often this FIT part of the contract is not included in your contract rate. So you might find your supplier within your bill is actually charging you separately for a feed-in tariff subsidy. Some suppliers include it, like EDF, British Gas, they go fixed is fixed. Others will include the renewables obligation part, which is a bit down the bottom there, but they may not include FIT. Others don't include either. So the renewables obligation is very much to do with offshore wind and, in essence, the investment that the government have made into offshore winds primarily. And as you can see, 2013-14, we're looking at 0.89 pence a kilowatt hour. That's included into your unit rate. And as we go through the following years, that's ramping up to nearly 2p in 2017-18 if you start including the feed-in tariff as well. So as I think you can see, from a comparison perspective, you really need to nail down what your contracts include and what they don't include. In a couple of years' time, you're going to have 2p's worth of green taxes. So if your cost is 10p a unit, for example, for electricity, really that would be nearer 12p. So from a comparison perspective, as I say, you need to make sure from your suppliers or your brokers or Lorraine, whatever, what is included within your contracts. So 20%, even if energy stays at the same levels now, moving forward, we're going to see at least a 20% increase in cost purely from these green taxes that are placed on your pence per kilowatt hour. So how to avoid some costly mistakes? Make sure you validate comparisons on a like-for-like basis. It's just what we're covering off there. So as I said, markets do move within day quite substantially. A supplier's margin will only be roughly, for our suppliers we use, will be 2 to 3%. It's not very much. So if the markets swing by 5 to 7 or 10% even, then they will withdraw their price because they don't have enough margin in it to keep it. So if you are going to market yourself, make sure that you request the supplier or broker quotes on the same day so you can look at a like-for-like basis. You need to make sure you've got the same volume. Often, particularly in the local authority world, which you guys aren't in particularly, but they will just quote, oh, it's your cost is £20,000 this year, and not actually quote a volume. More for the larger sites, for half-hourly sites, we need to make sure that you have the same power factor and the same demand load, because that can often change the price on electricity. And with gas as well, it's more rather than a baked bean scenario, it's more when you use the power which determines the price, as opposed to how much you use. So if you use a lot at the wrong times of day, for example between 4 and 7, your price will actually be worse than if you used a lot of electricity at night or early in the morning or something. So electricity is very much a time and demand driven commodity. Gas is a little bit as well. Obviously gas is more expensive in the winter than it is in the summer, for example. So from an inclusions exclusions perspective, this again is where you need to look at your cost elements within your contracts. So say we've covered on the our own feed-in tariffs there, but again, is the contract a pass-through contract? Is it fixed? Are there going to be reconciliations at points through the period? Does it include a triad charge, which is an expensive charge for peak electricity during the winter months? And more on a smaller scale, but does the contract include metering and data collection charges? They're only a few £100s a year, but again, it can make a difference, particularly on gas, if you have many aggregated gas meters. The metering charge, is it from an aggregated perspective, or is a metering charge on a per meter basis? Again, that can be substantially different in cost. If you're looking at, say, £10 a day for a metering charge, and you have 10 meters, it soon adds up, as opposed to those 10 meters being aggregated. So, invoice validation. A lot of companies out there say they do it. It is worth doing, even if you just do it yourselves. And ultimately, the supply invoices that we get from suppliers aren't always correct. The industry average is the accepted rate is actually plus or minus 3%. And from our own perspective, we actually find that we have a plus or minus 21%. So if you had a supply invoice of, say, £1,000, the industry average would be £30. We actually find, on average, there's about £210 worth of errors. And certainly, an invoice we validated just recently, we saved, it was a very large one, but we'd saved them in excess of £200,000 off a £1 million bill. So it does stack up. It looks quite alarming. You think that you know, a fifth of your bill might potentially be correct, but that swings the other way. Obviously, there might be some errors on there. For example, the supplier may not charge a capacity charge, which they should be charging. And so you can win in that way, but actually being undercharged is much more of an inconvenience, being overcharged, because the supplier then have 6 years under the Statute of Limitations Act to actually go back and recoup that charge. So if they do find it, you know, 4.5 years down the line, and it could be a substantial amount of money, they can legally come back to you and prove that they've undercharged you. So it's quite annoying actually having more so an undercharge than an overcharge. So what do you need to validate on an invoice? There's lots of, particularly what type of contract you're on. Fundamentally, you need to make sure the rates are correct and they're what you agree to within the contract. And particularly as well, as I said just now, does that include renewables obligation? Does it include feed-in tariff? Is that a separate line item on a bill? Yes or no? You know, the secondary school, large secondary, large independent school, you'd be looking at something in the region of, you know, up to £10,000 potentially for the average school, just in green charges. So you really need to make sure, as I want to drill that home, that you know what's included in the contract. From a consumption perspective, if you're half hourly or you have AMR, that should be validated against the raw half-hourly data. So if your bill says that you've used 30,000 units on your invoice, the raw half-hourly data should also say that you've used 30,000 units, because they literally go from half hour to half hour. On a non-half-hourly perspective, so a smaller electricity meter or gas metering, the only way to validate that really is to take regular readings yourselves and make sure you provide those to the supplier. And often the suppliers, it's easier for us to give them a meter reading at the end of the month, but they would have already gone into their billing cycle. So you need to check with your supplier what is the best day to actually give the meter reading, because it generally is between the 20th and 25th of each month. So that will give them time to put that customer reading into the invoice and then pass it on to yourselves. If you do have regular bills and you have constant estimated readings, suppliers don't have to take a reading only every once every 2 years. It might find that they've been massively underbilling you or massively overbilling you. So I'd really recommend and watch out for you know, the estimated reading versus a customer reading, because if you have also changed contract over that period, they'll do the catch-up on your new higher contract rate as opposed to your lower contract rate. Demand versus capacity is a good one. There'll be a size of capacity cable that goes into the school, and it might be that your demand is nowhere near that capacity, and therefore you can reduce the actual capacity charge. That could be quite substantial if your capacity is large. The average capacity charge is around about 70p to £1 per kVA. So if you're reducing your capacity by 100, that could be £100 a month that you'd be saving. Caveat behind that is if you feel your school is going to a bit of a growth pattern and you're going to have extra buildings, you may need that capacity in future months or years, and therefore there's no guarantee that the supply distribution company can give you that capacity back, so be very aware of that. And the kVA rate, as I've just touched on, is the same as capacity, so it's what you're actually paying from a contractual perspective. Again, the green tax pass-throughs of our own feed-in tariff. And also from a VAT perspective, if you're a church, foundation, academy, trust or boarding, you should be paying VAT at 5%, which negates the climate change levy, and there are good savings to be had on that particular perspective. But you do really need to make sure that, especially in the independent sector, the meter that you want to apply that to is actually feeding, boarding, accommodation, and not the actual main school. And lastly, seems a bit mad really, but are they your meters? We find, especially in multi-meter situations, we find many meters that have either been disconnected or capped or de-energized, and you're still paying for it on your supply invoices. So again, the same applies to us. We can go back under the Statute of Limitations Act to the supplier and say, I'm sorry, but you've been billing me this meter for the past 3 years. It's been disconnected. Here's the proof, and they would have to reimburse you your money. So just following into some future pricing trends, we are, although we're an island, we are actually affected by world politics and world events. Things such as war, credit, oil, weather, economy, demand, natural disasters, all those things actually affect the UK PLC from an energy perspective. Some of it is very emotive and very trend-driven because, for example, when Russia decided not to pass gas through Uzbekistan, the cost of gas went up a few years ago, and actually we're not supplied by Russian gas whatsoever. So there are sort of, you know, we do get hit by trends. It has no impact on us sometimes, but ultimately it is a commodity, and generally what's happening on the petrol pumps will tend to affect what's happening with our spot prices from an electricity and gas perspective. And so they are both commodities, and they're traded by volume, they're traded by demand and time. So gas is traded in firms, electricity is traded in ether blocks, and that's where you can start, if you're on a flexible contract, start thinking, well, actually, you know, we're currently in a good spell of weather at the moment. We're not, if you look at the long-range weather forecast the next month, it doesn't look like we're going to be freezing during March. So actually, the price should start falling. So I might actually choose to just roll on a day-ahead contract and not actually lock in anything yet, because I think the weather's going to go in our favour. So as you can see here, the this is a sort of 10-year, well, longer than 10 years actually, but power curve actually is actually driven by gas, but pretty much electricity follows it in the same way. So going way back to September 99, the good old days, if anyone can remember that far back, where we were looking at sort of 0.5p for gas fully delivered and about 3p for electricity. But Zenergi kind of kicked off in this sort of field here, and these small stars are where we've actually gone to market, and as you can see, we've pretty much picked some low points in the trend. We do get lots of pricing data through various spectrum and various organisations every day, so we kind of know what we're doing to a degree. But on the benefit of energy, unlike stocks and shares, is you do have a forward price curve, so we do know what energy is being traded at in 16, 17, and 18 currently. Just looking at the green graph here, back in October 12, this is what gas was projected to turn out at over the next following 12 months, and the yellow curve is actually what it did turn out at. So you can see the projection there was quite a ways out, and had clients gone on day-ahead prices, they would have outstripped the market a little bit there. And the purple graph here is actually what's happened from what they projected from last October. I've kept it the same to make the comparison easy. But this curve here, you can see that really, if you've got any contracts that are renewing this year, you kind of need to start looking at it about now, and that is actually backed up by real-life gas prices and electricity prices. So they're currently heading towards probably a 2-year low as we go through the coming months. So if you have any contracts renewing this year, obviously give Lorraine a call and definitely look into it, because coming up now is quite a good time, and I think as we get through to the summer months, looking at that graph, it's going to start creeping up. So now would be a good time. I have some more technical issues here. 2 seconds, bear with me. There we go. Hopefully that So we go. Excellent. So this is just, again, taking some data that we've received on forward gas and electricity trends, more than prices. You can see that electricity over the coming years is actually starting to continue to rise, really. Now, this is just the raw cost of the power. It's not anything else. So what you need to be aware of is obviously the feed-in tariffs and renewables going on top of this will increase the cost. And gas is actually coming down in price, so your longer-term gas will be cheaper than the short-term costs. So just whizzing through from energy management perspective before we wrap up, we've got one thing you need to really look at is your energy cost and range, put in that for cost per pupil. Right, the DFE average is about £44, but I've seen some things up to £160. And also get a square meterage and start costing the cost of your pupils out on how much that actually is costing your school. And from a water perspective, the only way you can actually monitor data and spot leaks is through this monitoring as well. So you kind of need a bit of a plan to put in place to manage your energy, and we find they fall into these three great categories of excellent and business efficiency, environment and community, teaching and learning. So that kind of involves the pupils, make sure the school's going on the right track, and also you have some procurement functionality there as well. And with this simple plan, really, is where are you going? What do you want to achieve ultimately? It's no good putting solar panels straight on the roof. You need to start monitoring your consumption. So if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And you want to know about where the energy is being used and how much you're using in a particular part of the school, and review and act on that data, because without that sort of feedback, you can't really put together this plan. And as I say there, if you do the same today as yesterday, you'll get the same result. So give some feedback to the interested parties, the students, to the teachers, to the senior management team, and then educate and motivate and get them right. We can start saving some power and put some cost behind it so you can actually see the benefits. And only really then, when you've done all that, should you then invest in sort of solar or wind or other alternatives. So there's a kind of small diagram as to the measure, the understand, review and act, etc. And your supply alternatives that we've got out there currently are the solar, the geo, wind power, biomass, anabolic generation, VO. So there's lots of alternatives for the green part. So apologies for flying through it just at the tail end of the presentation here, but there's some useful websites that you can make note of. Sorry, Lorraine, I should have put yours on there as well, of course, but there's some really good ones. Generation Green, the British Gas one is very good. Energy Saving Trust and Carbon Trust and EDF have a good one as well, actually. So that concludes my part for now. I hope you've enjoyed that, and open to any questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Kev. That's fantastic. I think there's a few interesting things there that I picked up. I certainly think I was very interested in the fact that triads are involved in energy, which is rather concerning, to say the least. And I think what was also particularly interesting was with regard to the increase in energy costs, being a 20% increase, even if energy costs stay the same, just purely from the green taxes perspective. So, that's obviously quite a concern, isn't it?
It is.
I just had one very quick slide, really, which is the benefits of using a broker. And when I say that, I don't necessarily just mean Zenergi. I'm talking about, obviously, there are other brokers available, as they say. But the real benefits are things like the expert knowledge and understanding that they've got of the energy markets. And I think that's just been demonstrated by what you've just gone through there, Kev. And the fact is, I've been involved in looking at energy contracts for 4 years now, and there's still so much that I don't know because it's such a complex area. So I think it's one of those areas of procurement where if you can utilise expertise to help you, it will really stand you in good stead. Help and support when things go wrong. I mean, it was really interesting, some of the things you were chatting about there. I'm aware of one of my clients who had a £16,000 gas bill come out of nowhere, where basically they had been undercharged for a long period of time. And I know Kev and his team helped support and validate whether that was right or wrong, and just gave that additional support that was needed. And funnily enough, the same school actually had a building next door. The meter for that building was on their premises, and they were actually paying for the gas of the building next door. And again, Zenergi were there to help actually facilitate getting that
Not
sorted.
as uncommon as you think.
I know, it's incredible, isn't it? You couldn't make it up, could you really?
Not really, no.
So, and then liaison with suppliers as well when you need new supplies. So if if you're having examples of new buildings, or I've got an example of a school where they had a floodlights needed for a new playing field area. Liaison with the supplier to help with that is invaluable support. Hints and tips that save you thousands. One thing that we've certainly discovered is if you're having new building works done, don't let the contractor set up your contract for your gas or electricity supply. Their aim is generally to get the quickest install done. They're not interested in the contract pricing. And we've certainly discovered a number of occasions where, 6 to 12 months later, the schools discover that they've been on a horrendous contract rate, for that period of time. So that's the sort of advice and help you can get from people like Kev, to save you those sort of problems. Bill validation, I know Kev's covered in detail. Access to sort of corporate rates versus retail rates, which obviously has the benefit of better value for money. And a signpost, so a little bit like all those web addresses that Kev put up there a moment ago. If they can't help you themselves, then they'll know a man that can. And sometimes that's invaluable, rather than you scratching around looking at yellow pages and trying to think, well, who is it that can actually help us with that? So that's some of the benefits. I've had a couple of questions, Kev. The first one is, and he slightly covered this off actually, but I've heard it's better to go into contract earlier in the year. And a similar sort of question, how far in advance would you recommend that you renew your contract?
You can actually look at prices or fix in a contract 12 months in advance of when your renewal is. We're looking at contracts renewed for October now, but we could actually renew a contract for next February if we wanted to. But it does revolve around kind of what the markets are doing. So as I said, kind of now is a good time. So markets are going through a slump, and the weather's in our favour. A few years ago, we didn't renew any October contracts till July because the indications were that the summer was going to be a much better time. So it does revolve around this sort of forward price curve really, and finding out or looking to find out when the best prices are. It's not always correct. You can have all of a sudden a hurricane in Mexico or war break out in Nigeria, or someone finds a whole glut of oil under the North Sea. It could go either way really. So as I say, we are determined by world events ultimately, but no one ever wants to make a bad decision. You can go, if you did want to play the markets and the school was large enough, going on a flexible method, and you could just lock in, say, half of the power, half of your gas for the next 12 months and let the other half ride on the market. So there are different ways of doing it, definitely. But certainly, I think generally if you think of what's happening with fuel pumps and what's happening in the world, and there are many, many options out there to get daily reports. As I say, you can't say, oh, actually March the 17th is going to be the best day, because if I knew that, I'd be on a beach in the Bahamas.
Yeah, I had actually recommended to a school once that they let their facilities manager have access to Sky News at all times in order to track world events. And obviously, if anyone's invading Libya or something, or there's a war breaking out, then it's probably not a great time to do it. So
no. And it's a very emotive market. If something like that does happen, the markets will go through the roof. And that's not a good day to sign a contract. Might let it calm down for a couple of days, and because there will always be a spike and it will always come back down again. Perhaps not to the levels they were, but it will fall back down again the day or two afterwards.
Brilliant. And then the other question I had was obviously the renewables obligation tariffs you've mentioned in there go up to sort of, I think it was 16, 17, but we didn't see anything for feed-in tariff beyond 14, 15. Is there a particular reason for that? There
is, yeah. The feed-in tariffs are very closely guarded secret almost. We've been quite lucky to obtain that information. It's not widely available in the open sector. The feed-in tariff is ultimately a charge for how much electricity is generated through solar power, and is always done retrospectively. So we never know kind of how much sun there's going to be, how much electricity is going to be generated, and hence how much the government needs to spread this tax around, if you see what I mean, and divide it up. So they are assumptions from suppliers to go, well, we think it's going to be that, but we have no idea what it's going to be further out. And certainly they, again, to watch out for in a contract, a supplier could say, well, our view of feed-in tariff is 0.244 pence a kilowatt hour, but we do reserve the right to amend that if it's higher or lower. So, I would recommend, to be honest, if you did want to budget certainty, is to choose a supplier that is including RO and fit in their delivered rate, and then you don't get any shocks and any surprises whatsoever.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Kev, that is so great. Thank you very, very much. That's been hugely informative. Really, really good. And there's some details here, everybody. There will be a recording of this sent out to all the people online at the moment and those that didn't make it. We'll also make it available on our website as well. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email myself or Kev. Be very, very happy to answer any questions you have. And that's it for this month. We'll send some details out of the next webinar in due course. And Kev, thanks very much once again.
Thanks, Kevan. No problem at all.